So in Buddhism, one teacher, many traditions, we've been talking about the four immeasurables, bodhicitta, the six perfections, and then we've been talking about Buddha nature. And in Buddha nature, we've talked about how the Chittamadrins view it, how the Madhyamikas view it, and now there's and the Tantrayana, how they view it, and now there's a small section on Chan Buddhism and how they view it. And like I started to say this morning, I think this is written in a more poetic thing. Anyway, you'll see. Okay, so we'll start. From the perspective of Chan, Chinese Chan, all sentient beings have the Buddha nature that is by nature pure. Here, pure means it transcends the duality of purity and impurity. Okay. By the way, is the little lamp here around somewhere? Okay, thank you. When the Buddha nature is fully manifested, that being is a Buddha. But because of afflictions and defilements, especially ignorance, Buddha nature is not presently manifest in sentient beings. Okay, so the idea that it's part of sentient beings, it's beyond purity and impurity, it is covered by afflictions and defilements, and so for that reason it's not manifest. So pure mind and Buddha nature refer to the same thing, but approach it from different angles. Pure mind indicates that the nature of the mind is not and cannot be polluted by defilements. So that sounds more that the nature of the afflictions are not in the nature of the mind. They're not embedded in the nature of the mind. Buddha nature refers to the aspect of the mind that guarantees our potential and capability to become Buddhas. So it doesn't say what that is, but perhaps that refers to the suchness or emptiness of the mind. See, you see what I mean by it doesn't explain exactly what those words mean. It, gives you some kind of description, yeah? But it's not as precise as we may be used to. When purified, this Buddha nature is called the awakened mind or actual bodhicitta, indicating that when ignorance was present, we did not know our pure nature, and now with the removal of ignorance, we see and understand it. From the perspective that unawakened beings do not yet recognize the pure nature of the mind, it is said that they do not have the bodhi mind or bodhicitta. Okay, so here bodhi mind we can see is, or bodhicitta doesn't mean exactly what we're used to it meaning. Okay, but from the perspective of the fundamental nature of the mind being pure of adventitious defilements, it is said that they have bodhi mind. So bodhi mind sounds here like maybe they're talking to the mind that's fully awakened, but again, it's not particularly defined. Okay, but we can. Thank you. Oh, that helps a lot. So, but we can see that it might be parallel to some things that we're used to, but it's hard to say for sure. Okay, so here bodhicitta refers, so before it sounded like they do not have the bodhi mind, but from the perspective of the fundamental nature of the mind being pure of adventitious defilements, it is said they have the bodhi mind. So bodhi mind could mean enlightenment, it could mean the potential for enlightenment. Here it says bodhi mind or bodhicitta refers to the pure mind that can never be tarnished. It is like a pearl that has been covered with mud for thousands of years. Even though it is hidden in mud and its luster cannot be seen, none of its shining beauty has been lost. It is just temporarily obscured. It can be removed from the mud and cleaned so that its beauty is visible to all. Its luster did not decrease by being covered with mud, and its luster did not increase once it was removed from the mud. Similarly, our Buddha nature is always pure. Its qualities do not decrease when it is covered with defilements, and they do not increase when the defilements are eradicated. So in Maitreya's Sublime Continuum, there's 9 analogies for what Buddha nature is, okay? And many of them, it isn't the pearl in mud, but they have a Buddha statue buried in the earth, honey surrounded by bees, okay? A very poor and neglected woman who is bearing a universal emperor in her womb. So all 9 of the examples are very similar to this, the idea of there's something very pure and very wonderful, and it's covered and obscured and cannot be seen. Okay, Gyaltsabje, when he talks in Ulama, he defines what that is very particularly. There's a commentary by a Khargyu Lama in our library that I read, and again, it doesn't specify exactly, what it is. It talks about it in this way, but it doesn't specify exactly what is meant by Buddha nature. But that's okay. I mean, that's maybe part of the riddle for us to figure out, isn't it? So bodhicitta is Buddha nature. In the Chan tradition, the terms true suchness, Buddha nature, original nature, ultimate reality, pure nature, and so on have similar meanings. They refer to what cannot be fully known with words. So maybe that's why we're not getting specific definitions. Okay. To realize the Buddha nature, or bodhicitta, is to realize that it is uncreated, it does not disappear, it is originally pure. So Peitsu, a Tang Dynasty layman praised by the Huayan and Chan patriarch Zongmi, explained that bodhicitta must be generated from our true mind, from the pure aspect of our mind that is part of our Buddha nature. Okay. It does not arise from identifying with our samsaric body or the obscured mind obsessed by sense pleasure and worldly success. Okay, so that makes it clear. It's not something that is involved with samsara at all. Okay? Our true body is perfect and complete, empty and quiescent. And our true mind is vast in its scope and imbued with intelligence and awareness. The perfect and complete Dharmakaya is replete with countless virtuous qualities. It is empty and quiescent in that it goes beyond all forms and characteristics and is forever free of disturbances. The true mind is vast in that it coincides with the Dharma Dhatu, the sphere of reality. Okay, so we're getting some description here, yeah. But it's clearly something. You can see by the description that it's clearly something that it's going to be very difficult for us to conceptualize and pin down. Yeah. It is imbued with intelligence and awareness because it is focused, penetrating, and clear, investigating illumination. Encompassing great virtuous qualities, it cuts through fallacious thinking such as the wrong view that things exist from self, other, both, or causelessly. Okay, so it has some wisdom. Yeah, it's focused, penetrating, so it sounds like it's a consciousness. Okay, but it's also empty and quiescent, so empty of, we would say, inherent existence. The Chan system, I'm not sure exactly how, some Chan practitioners follow Chittamatra, some follow Madhyamaka, so I'm not sure how they would define empty. Okay. Like a full moon obscured by the clouds of afflictions, its original purity will manifest when the afflictions have been abandoned. So it's this idea that there's something pure inside that's always been there, that can never be separated, that is covered and obscured, but that the covering, the obscuration has not entered its very nature, and when it is purified, then its radiance shines forth, and the purification is the abandonment of the afflictions and defilements. As said in the Avatamsaka Sutra, the mind, the Buddha, and beings as well, in these three there are no distinctions. Okay, so from a Madhyamaka view, you would say there's no distinctions because they're all three empty of inherent existence. But we have to ask more questions what the Chan tradition means by that. Okay, the true mind is the same as the essence of the bodhicitta. When we do not see this, we become entwined with false conceptualizations and engage in actions that bind us to samsara. Okay? So we may not know exactly what it is, but there's certainly a lot of description in there that we can identify with, and we know a little bit what it is and what it isn't. Okay, then the next section is understanding tathagatagarbha. Tathagatagarbha, okay? So this is often translated as Buddha essence. It's, in many ways, it means the same thing as Buddha nature or Buddha disposition, but in some traditions it has a slightly different meaning. And the whole notion of tathagatagarbha has been controversial in the history of Buddhism because people have different ideas about what it is. Okay? And so some people say it's emptiness, or maybe the fundamental and pure mind. Other people say that it's a fully enlightened Buddha that abides within us already. Okay, which then other people refute that idea. So here we go with it, okay? Also, because the way tathagatagarbha is described, sometimes it sounds like they're almost talking about a soul of some sort, which doesn't sound very Buddhist at all. So that kind of question comes up, but this will come out a little bit in the passage. Okay, so the whole idea of the Tathagatagarbha Sutra appeared in India. It was very, very popular in China. Yeah, extremely popular. So much so that Yinzhen, the monk that I mentioned this morning, the great 20th century scholar, he talked about Chinese Buddhism now, at present, having three philosophical schools, the Yogacara, or Chittamatra, the Madhyamaka, and Tathagatagarbha. Okay? In India, there was only one, Maitreya wrote his text, the Gyulama, okay? Wanted to say the Sanskrit name, I can't get it all out. Or Uttara Tantra, it goes by two names, okay? Ratanagotra. of Gotra Vibhaga, okay, sutra, or Uttara Tantra, okay. But he wrote a text on it. A Sangha wrote a commentary on it, and that's about all in the Indian tradition. There weren't a lot of commentaries on the whole notion of tathagatagarbha, but it became very, very popular in Chinese Buddhism, and it, was well known in Tibetan Buddhism too, but it spawned, the traditional schools had their interpretation of it, and then there was another school, the Jonang, that came up that had a very different interpretation of what it meant, and so there was a lot of controversy about that. Okay, anyway, you'll see as we get into this. So the Tathagatagarbha Sutra is popular in China and Tibet. In the Tathagatagarbha Sutra is popular in China and Tibet. The Buddha explains that each sentient being has a permanent, stable, and enduring tathagatagarbha, or Buddha essence, that is a fully developed Buddha body, complete with the 32 signs. Okay, now this sounds really different from what we normally hear, okay, because something that's permanent, okay, here actually permanent means eternal, but many of the Tibetans, when they hear the word permanent, go back to their usual definition and say, "You're saying that there's a permanent Buddha essence? You can't say that." Okay. But His Holiness explains when they say permanent, it means, everlasting. But still, it's a fully developed Buddha body, complete with the 32 signs inside every, Susan, Henrietta, and George, come on. There's a Buddha with the 32, a Buddha body. I mean, come on, what is this? Okay. While some people take this literally and accept it as a definitive teacher, Madhyamikas disagree, asking, if a Buddha existed within us in our present state, wouldn't we be ignorant Buddhas? Okay, so if you say there's a fully developed Buddha inside us, and yet we're sentient beings that are confused, then that sounds really contradictory. And if there's a Buddha already inside us, why do we need to practice the path? And they say, to purify. But if there's already a fully developed Buddha inside, why do we need to purify? Okay, so you get this kind of conversation going on. If we were actually Buddhas now, what would be the purpose of practicing the path? Okay, so if we had a permanent, stable, and enduring essence, wouldn't that contradict the teachings on selflessness and instead resemble the self asserted by non-Buddhists? So can you hear all these Buddhist masters going bananas? Okay? But these same doubts were expressed by Mahamati in the Lankavatara Sutra. Okay? So these doubts are in one of the sutras that teaches the tathagatagarbha. So it makes you wonder, what was the Buddha teaching? Why was he really teaching that? What's the meaning? Okay. Also because the Lankavatara Sutra is in the third turning of the Dharma wheel, the Prajnaparamita Sutras that we look to for the explanation of ultimate truth was in the second turning. So this was a later turning. So what's going on? Yeah. So here's the passage from the Lankavatara. The tathagatagarbha taught by the Buddha is said to be clear light in nature. Okay, so remember, clear light sometimes refers to emptiness, sometimes refers to the clear and knowing nature of the mind, sometimes can refer to that extremely subtle innate mind, and also other things, whatever you want it to refer to. Yeah. So it is said to be clear light in nature, completely pure from the beginning, and to exist, possessing the 32 signs. So those are physical signs in a Buddha's body. Of course, a Buddha's body is made of light, so it doesn't mean material here. And to exist, possessing the 32 signs in the bodies of all sentient beings. If, like a precious gem wrapped in a dirty cloth, the Buddha expressed that the tathagatagarbha wrapped in and dirtied by the cloth of our polluted aggregates, constituents, and sources, overwhelmed by the force of attachment, anger, and ignorance, dirtied with the defilements of thought, and permanent, stable, and enduring, how is this propounded as tathagatagarbha different from the non-Buddhist propounding a self? Okay, so questions asked right there in the sutra. In examining the meaning of the tathagatagarbha teachings, Madhyamikas respond to 3 questions, okay? So this is a way that they use to analyze these kind of passages. Okay, so first question they ask is, what was the Buddha's final intended meaning when making such a statement? Okay, so when the Buddha said there's a permanent, stable, and enduring Buddha essence that is a fully developed Buddha body, complete with the 32 signs, what was his final intended meaning when he said that? In other words, is this something, what was he really, that we take literally, or what was the Buddha really trying to get across when he said this? Okay, so here's how they make sense of it. Yeah, when the Buddha spoke of a permanent, stable, and enduring essence in each sentient being, his intended meaning, even though he may not have said it in so many words, was the emptiness of the mind, the naturally abiding Buddha nature, which is permanent, stable, and enduring. Because the mind is empty of inherent existence and the defiles are adventitious, Buddhahood is possible. Okay, so that's how they deal with one question, what was the Buddha's intended meaning? Then, okay, well, what was the Buddha's purpose for teaching this? Why did he say something like this when his intended meaning was emptiness? Why didn't he say emptiness? Why did he talk about a permanent, enduring, stable Buddha essence? Okay, why did he do that? Okay, so the answer, at present, some people are spiritually immature, and the idea of selflessness and emptiness frightens them. They mistakenly think it means that nothing whatsoever exists, and fear that by realizing emptiness, they will cease to exist. Okay, so this is the difficulty when people who are not well-trained, who skip over the fundamental teachings and want to just get to, I want to hear about the ultimate nature of reality, and they jump to that, very quickly without a good base, then there's a lot of danger that when they hear emptiness of inherent existence, they think it means total non-existence. And then they go around saying nothing whatsoever exists. Yeah, and when I die, everything, there's just complete blank. There's nothing after that. So, karma doesn't make any sense. Ethical conduct doesn't make any sense. And anyway, all this stuff around me doesn't really exist now. So, okay, they become very nihilistic. Yeah. So this is a danger. So, being to calm their fear and gradually lead them to the full and correct realization of emptiness, the Buddha spoke in a way that corresponded with their current ideas, saying there was a permanent, stable, enduring essence, complete with the 32 signs. Okay? So this is a skillful mean. Here are these people that the Buddha wants to lead to enlightenment. If he tells them straight out, literally, the way things are, they can't handle it. They freak out. So what he does is he tells them something that corresponds with what they already believe. Okay? They gain faith in him. They start to study the teachings. As they study the teachings, as they develop their practice, then slowly the Buddha can start saying, well, actually, it doesn't mean some kind of soul or self. It means the emptiness of the mind. And at that time, when he says it, they won't freak out, because by that time they'll have learned the foundation teachings. Okay, so it's kind of like, I don't think many of us are parents, but if you have kids in the car and you're going on a long trip and your kids hate sitting in the car for a long time, yeah, and you want to get from here to Los Angeles in 2 days, okay, you don't say, okay, we're going to drive 20 hours a day, kids, and, just sit here and be quiet because we got to get to LA in 2 days, and we're driving straight through, because your kids are going to totally freak, okay? So you say, well, we're not going to LA. We're really going to Portland, okay? So you go to Portland, and maybe you even take 2 days to get to Portland. Yeah, so what's that, 4 hours a day driving? The kids are okay with 4 hours. They make it to Portland, they get out of the car, they stretch, they're happy, there's no complaining. They can handle 4 hours in the car, and they play looking at all the different license plates. That's what you do when you're a kid in a long car. Look at all the different license plates from different states. Okay? Then, after they're in Portland, they've gone swimming, they've run around, then you say, oh, tomorrow we're going to go a little bit further. Okay? We're going to go to Shasta Abbey tomorrow. Okay? And then you take him to Shasta Abbey from Portland. It's a little bit longer, maybe 5 hours, something. Okay, so you get to Shasta Abbey. They run around. It's beautiful. There's nice monks and nuns there. The kids are happy, Maybe you spend an extra day there, yeah, so they can be with all these nice people and hear them chant. And then you say, oh, we're going to go a little bit further. And so in this way, what you're doing is you don't give the kids the whole plan at the beginning, because they're going to freak. Yeah, you give them little bits. Yeah, and you make them happy as they're going along, and then that's a very skillful way to get them to the end. Okay, anybody who has kids knows that that's how you do it. Okay, yeah. Who has kids besides you? Anybody else have kids? Okay, we're a great group, aren't we? We're working on population control. Okay, so, yeah, okay. So that's kind of like what the Buddha's doing here. Yeah. Then the third question the Madhyamikas ask is, what logical inconsistencies arise from taking this statement at face value? Okay, so if we took it literally, what are the logical problems? Because if there's logical problems, then we really know for sure that that's not what the Buddha didn't mean this literally. Okay, so if this were a literal teaching, there would be no difference between this and the assertions of non-Buddhists who adhere to a permanent, inherently existent self. A permanent essence contradicts the definitive meaning the emptiness of inherent existence, as expressed in the Prajnaparamita Sutras, and as refuted by reasoning. Okay? So we know it's not a definitive teaching. We can't take it literally. This is not the Buddha's ultimate meaning. There's some other meaning, and there's a reason why he taught it. Okay? And the reason makes sense. So the emptiness of inherent existence, the ultimate reality and natural purity of the mind, exists in all sentient beings without distinction. In that sense, it is said that a Buddha is there. Okay, so we talk about the empty nature of the mind, and the emptiness of a Buddha's mind, the emptiness of our mind, from the perspective of a mind that is perceiving this directly, there's no difference. They're both empty of inherent existence. Okay, and this exists in all sentient beings. So in that sense, we can say a Buddha's there, because the ultimate nature of the Buddha's mind is the same, and it's in sentient beings. But an actual Buddha does not exist in sentient beings. While Buddhas and sentient beings are similar in that the ultimate nature of their minds is emptiness, that ultimate reality is not exactly the same. From the viewpoint of the mind that directly perceives it, it is the same. But from the viewpoint of our conventional mind that talks about things, that ultimate reality is not the same. Because one is the ultimate nature of a Buddhist mind, which is the nature Dharmakaya, and the other is the ultimate nature of a defiled mind. So because the minds, which are the basis of that emptiness, are different, then in that respect, the emptiness of inherent existence of those two minds differ. Okay, in that sense. Okay. If the nature Dharmakaya, so if you say, the empty nature of the mind of the Buddha is the nature Dharmakaya, which it is, but then if you said, well, the Buddha's emptiness, emptiness of the Buddha's mind, the emptiness of sentient being's mind is exactly the same. So then the nature Dharmakaya of a Buddha must exist in sentient beings' minds, and if that exists in sentient beings' minds, then the sentient beings must already be a Buddha. Okay, that's how some people could think. Wrong. Okay, because if the nature Dharmakaya existed in sentient beings, the wisdom Dharmakaya, which is the Buddha's mind, which is one nature with the nature Dharmakaya, would also exist in sentient beings. That would mean that sentient beings would be omniscient. Okay? So if you say that the ultimate nature of the two minds are the same, and the ultimate nature of the Buddha's mind is the nature Dharmakaya, so that must be the ultimate. The sentient beings also have the nature Dharmakaya. Then if the nature Dharmakaya is the emptiness of the Buddha's mind. So then, if sentient beings have the nature Dharmakaya, then they must also have the wisdom Dharmakaya. That's the basis of that emptiness. The wisdom Dharmakaya is the omniscient mind, which means sentient beings already has an omniscient mind. Do you have an omniscient mind? Okay? Yeah, so we can see that something's not holding water here, okay? So this is indicating to us that, it has to be understood differently than how we're presently understanding it. Similarly, if the abandonment of all defilements existed in sentient beings, there would be nothing preventing them from directly perceiving emptiness, and they would have that realization. Do you directly perceive emptiness? I don't. Okay. And I'm a sentient being. So, that too is not the case. If the 32 signs of the Buddha's body were already present in us, it would be contradictory to say that we still need to practice the path to create the causes for them. So if we already had a Buddha's body within us, why do we need to attain a Buddha's body? If we already have it, then why do we need to create the causes to receive it? So then what's the use of practicing the path? Yeah, if we already have a Buddha's body, we already have a Buddha's mind, there's nothing to practice. We would already be Buddhas. Yeah. So your usnisha on the crown of your head would be visible to everybody. So would your long earlobes and the webs between your fingers and your third eye and the eyes in the palms of your hands and the wheels on the soles of your feet. They would be there all the time. So when you walked in the mud, we would see and you could walk without shoes because you wouldn't feel cold because you're a Buddha, and you stepped in the mud outside, and we would see the prints of the Dharma wheel. Okay, so please go show your powers. Okay, well, wipe your feet before you come inside. Okay, so, yeah, so all of that creates big problems. There would be no reason to have to practice the path. If someone said they were already in us, the 32 signs were already in us in an unmanifest form and just needed to be made manifest, that would resemble the Samkhya notion of arising from self, because they say cause and effect exists at the same time. The effect is already there, it just needs to be made manifest. So then we would all become Samkhyas if we believe that about our Buddha nature. Yeah, you don't want to be a Samkhya, do you? Okay. And Madhyamikas refute that notion. So here, the previous paragraph we read from the Lankavatara Sutra was one of the disciples asking the question, like, what's the difference between what's the difference between what you're saying and what these non-Buddhists say is a self? Now the Buddha is going to answer. So, Mahamati, my teaching of the tathagatagarbha is not similar to the propounding of a self by the non-Buddhists. Mahamati, the Tathagata Arhats, the Tathagatas, should be comma, Arhats, the completely perfect Buddhas, having indicated the tathagatagarbha with the meaning of the words emptiness. Oh yeah, tathagata arhat. Okay, yeah, there's no S on the end. So tathagata arhats, the completely perfect Buddhas, having indicated the tathagatagarbha with the meaning of the words emptiness, the limit of complete purity, nirvana, unproduced, signless, wishless, and so forth, so that the immature might completely relinquish a state of fear due to the selfless, teach the non-conceptual state, the sphere without appearances. Okay? So what he's saying is that elsewhere he said that the tathagatagarbha means emptiness, the limit of complete purity, referring to emptiness, nirvana, which is a type of emptiness, unproduced, meaning it's not produced inherently, signless, it has no signs of inherent existence, wishless, it's not going to be something inherently existent, and so forth, so that the immature might completely relinquish a state of fear due to the selfless. Okay, so that the people who are spiritually immature don't freak out, and relinquish their fear, so that the Buddha can continue to gradually lead them. But the Buddha is really teaching the non-conceptual state, indicating emptiness, and the sphere without appearances, without the appearance of true existence. Okay. So here we see that the Buddha skillfully taught different things to different people according to what was necessary at the moment to lead them on the path. We also learn that we must think deeply about the teachings, employ reasoning, and read widely in the sutras and commentaries to discern their definitive meaning. By doing so we need to learn, we need to think about things. Okay? That's what it's saying. By doing so, we will reach the correct understanding of the tathagatagarbha sutras, which contain profound meanings hinting at the existence of the fundamental innate clear-like mind explained in Tantra. So His Holiness says that the tathagatagarbha sutras, which are considered a sutrayana, explanation, that they actually hint at Tantra, because the way they talk about the mind and Buddha nature and so on, it's like, it makes you question, what exactly is this mind the Buddha's talking about? And then to answer your own inner question, you have to seek more information. And so then you turn to the Tantra explanation. And so that's a way of leading people from Sutrayana to Tantrayana. Okay, hinting at the existence of the fundamental innate clear-like mind explained in Tantra. Because that's ultimately what you want people to understand as the Buddha nature. The purpose of learning about Buddha nature and tathagatagarbha is to understand that the mind is not intrinsically flawed and can be perfected, and that the aspects of the mind already exist that allow it to be purified and perfected. Okay? So our mind is not inherently, the garbage is not the nature of the mind. The afflictions are not embedded in the nature of the mind. Okay. And there are aspects that already exist in the mind that enable the mind to be purified and to generate excellent qualities limitlessly. Okay. So that's your evolving Buddha nature. Understanding this will give us great confidence and energy to practice the methods to purify and perfect this mind of ours so that it will become the mind of a fully awakened Buddha, which is the Buddha's ultimate aim.
Is the Lankavatara Sutra considered a tathagatagarbha sutra?
I think so, yeah.
Would you say that the difference between an arhat and a Buddha is that the arhat has just abandoned the defilements, whereas a Buddha has abandoned the defilements and cultivated good qualities?
The arhats have cultivated good qualities, but the Buddha has abandoned more obscurations than an arhat has, and a Buddha has cultivated the good qualities much more than the arhat has, and cultivated some good qualities that the arhat hasn't. Okay?
I think it's always like, is it just eradicating ignorance or is it cultivating wisdom? There's that kind of, you can look at it from both sides.
How are you going to eradicate ignorance if you don't cultivate wisdom?
Yeah, so I think it's like different traditions have approached it from a different point of view, it seems.
No, the Pali tradition says you need to cultivate wisdom and you need to eliminate the afflictions.
I mean, here in the tathagatagarbhas, they're saying, oh, the pure mind is already there. It's, just a matter of bringing it forth.
Yeah, but did you see how that idea is being refuted here?
Yes.
Read the chapter again. Okay? There are schools within Tibetan Buddhism, when we've been listening to Jeffrey, he's been teaching from the Nyingma point of view. Okay? But it does explain why if they say that the basal state is already pure, why it still needs to be purified. They explain that.
Just reading this chapter reminds me of how much I love the introduction of Don't Believe Everything You Think, where you set out, a very basic explanation of Buddha nature and linked it to how, we can change the way we think by challenging our logical, flawed ways of thinking. And that set the scene for this whole commentary on the 37 practices. And then now we're reading this at the end of all the bodhicitta teachings as the bridge to Tantra. I don't know, it's just blowing my mind that you can understand these teachings in such different ways.
Yeah.
From my simplistic point of view, I always thought, that was just such a nice foundation for me as a beginner to read about Buddha nature and get into the bodhicitta teachings like that.
Right.
And now to come back to this here, it's like...
Yeah. It's like many of the teachings that we receive. When we initially hear them, it may be a very simple explanation. And then after you learn more and meditate more, you hear the same teacher, but in a different context, and you hear it explained more elaborately, and you go, oh my goodness, is that what they were talking about way back then? Yeah? Okay. Because I was commenting in the car to you today that in volume 4, after explaining the 4 truths, then I'm explaining refuge. Yeah, because usually refuge comes after the 3 lower realms and before karma. The reason it comes there is because if you have concern about an unfortunate rebirth, then you seek help. So you seek help from the 3 jewels. And then because you have faith in them, then you have faith in karma, even though some aspects of karma cannot be proven exactly by logical reasoning, but you have faith in them because you have faith in the Buddha. So that's why it's explained there. Yeah. And so there, refuge is explained, you learn a little bit about the Buddha's qualities and you have a simpler introductory explanation. Yeah. But when you study what refuge is later, especially if you study it in conjunction with the 4 truths, and you begin to see that the Dharma jewel is the true cessation and true path, and you begin to learn what the true cessation is and what the true path is, then your understanding of refuge is like, whoa! Yeah? So it's the same topic, but when we're hearing it in 2 different contexts, also because our mind has expanded, from how we understood it here to our mind is more open and receptive, we have more background, we can understand it better here, then when you go look at that and say, you realize, all of this was actually hidden in that very simple explanation, but I didn't even see it. Yeah. So that happens quite a bit. Yeah. So whenever you think you've got it, I've got it, you haven't gotten it. Yeah. Just like I tell you, whenever you think, I've taken care of that defilement, I don't need to worry about it. You haven't. Okay. Okay. So, chapter 15, Tantra. Oh, Tantra! We're talking about Tantra. Oh. Are you excited? Are you nervous? Have you heard all sorts of stuff about Tantra? So, according to the understanding of Buddhist Vajrayana masters, Tantrayana is an important part of the Buddhist heritage passed down through the Nalanda and Vikramala Sila masters in ancient India, as well as by itinerant yogis. Buddhist Tantra differs from non-Buddhist forms of Tantra in that it is conjoined with refuge in the three jewels as a foundation, and with renunciation, bodhicitta, and correct view as the mainstays of the practice. So it should say correct view instead of correct wisdom. Thus, Vajrayana evolves from ideas mentioned in the Pali and general Sanskrit teachings. Okay, so if you study the teachings well, then, and if you know something about the Pali Sutras, when you learn the Mahayana, you see that, there are all these ideas in the Pali that the Mahayana, they took out and expanded on them and explained them very, very well. So something that might have been just mentioned briefly in the Pali Sutras, in the Mahayana Sutras, it's really elaborated on. Okay? So they aren't totally different traditions. Some people have that idea that they're just totally different forms of Buddhism. They're not. And our Tibetan teachers make very clear that, to practice Vajrayana depends on practicing Mahayana. To practice Mahayana depends on having a foundation in the fundamental vehicle. Yeah, the sutras, that are popular in the Pali tradition. Okay, and when you study Mahayana very well, then when you start to learn Tantrayana, then you see, here's these different things mentioned in Mahayana. In Tantrayana, they're explained much more fully. Okay, so you really see how these different traditions are linked to each other, how they're all different vehicles, paths of mind that take us to awakening. Okay, so Buddhist Tantra is conjoined with refuge in the three jewels and with an understanding of renunciation, bodhicitta, and correct view, which those three are commonly known as the three principal aspects of the path. And so thus Vajrayana evolves from ideas mentioned in the Pali and general Sanskrit teachings. Okay, now often in the West, you hear people say, there's three types of Buddhism. There's Vipassana, there's Zen, and there's Vajrayana. Yeah, you hear this often. Even Buddhist teachers say that. It's not correct at all. Okay, first of all, Vipassana is a meditation. It means insight, and every Buddhist tradition teaches insight meditation. The reason that some people call their tradition Vipassana is they were studying in Southeast Asia, and they were studying the Theravada tradition. They really liked the Vipassana meditation. They weren't so interested in all the teachings in which the meditation technique was embedded, and they wanted to teach that meditation technique in the West without all the things that surrounded it, talking about rebirth and Buddha and all these different things. So they took that meditation technique out, and so their tradition became known as Vipassana. But actually, their Vipassana is taken from within the Theravada, or the Pali tradition, you could say. And every Buddhist tradition, the Tibetans have Vipassana, they teach Vipassana. Yeah, they teach it in a different way than these people do, but it's still called Vipassana. Okay. So, saying there's three traditions, one is Vipassana, that's a little bit off. Saying the second one is Zen, well, Zen is the Tibetan, the Sanskrit word for dhyana, or it's called Chan in Chinese. So Zen actually came from Chan, okay? And in China itself, and Japan also, there's many, many more Buddhist traditions. There's not just Zen or Chan. There's Pure Land, there's Hua Yin, there's Tentai, there's, Sukha Siddhi. There's a Vinaya tradition. There's the Chinese sometimes talk about having 8 traditions or 11 traditions. So just saying there's Chan as referring to all Mahayana Buddhism is not correct. Okay. Then saying the third one is Vajrayana, as if Tibetan Buddhism and Vajrayana were exactly the same. That's not correct, because in Japan there's a form of Vajrayana called Shingon. Okay? And also, Tibetan Buddhism teaches the fundamental vehicle, the Mahayana, and then finally Vajrayana. Okay, and Vajrayana is based on the fundamental vehicle and the Mahayana. It's not some separate form of Buddhism. It's actually, you could say, a type of Mahayana Buddhism in the same way that Chan is a type of Mahayana Buddhism. Okay, so you can see all 3 of these terms are not actually accurate. Yeah, but this is what a lot of people say. And I remember many years ago, I was at a conference at the Garrison Institute of Western Buddhist teachers, and Gelek Rinpoche was there. And he gave a Dharma talk explaining this to everybody. Yeah, and right after the talk, people still kept talking the same way with the same terms. Okay, so it's this misunderstanding that has become quite popular in Western Buddhism, but isn't correct. Yeah.
Venerable, how about Dzogchen? I know that it's a very high teaching, and it's usually after Vajrayana.
Dzogchen, in the Nyingma tradition, yeah, they talk about 9 vehicles, yeah. And the first 3 are Sutrayana, the second 3 are the lower 3 Tantra classes, and the upper 3, correspond to what in other traditions would call highest Yoga Tantra. And Dzogchen is the highest, so it actually falls under Vajrayana. Yeah, it's not something separate.
I was surprised to attend a Australian Council of Buddhists, or that's not exactly the name, but it was like this council of all Buddhists within Australia, and they had divided all the Buddhists into 3 groups: Theravada, Mahayana, and Vajrayana. And when we heard that, we were holding the meeting at Chenrezig, and it was just like, what? And they said, don't go there. We've already decided this is how it's going to be. Interesting.
Yeah.
So the Mahayana was mostly the Chinese tradition.
And, yeah.
I guess this is what they could agree on as a compromise of how all the Buddhists in Australia were going to meet together.
Yeah, except the Tibetan tradition is a Mahayana tradition.
Of course.
Yeah, so it's these kind of things are kind of unfortunate, Yeah.
So I've been able to notice more and more that Western people have lots of wrong terms for all of this stuff.
Uh-huh.
How do you really politely tell them that they're just flat out wrong?
You jerk! No, you teach what's correct. It depends what the setting is and what your relationship with the person is.
Often I don't want to just start with, I know it's this. You tell them, I heard it a different way, and they continue it their way because they're so confident they're right.
Okay, so who are you talking to? A teacher, a friend, a parent?
Friends.
A friend. And they're saying something that is incorrect. Yeah. Then it depends on your friend's mind. Is your friend open to discussion, or do they feel like they know everything? Yeah, so you have to suss out the situation. you know. And if your friend is open to learning, then you could say, you know, I was someplace and they explain this and they explain that, and you know, it you don't necessarily have to say you're wrong. People don't like that very much, you know. But I heard it this way, and this makes a lot of sense to me, and I can, you know, refer you to some books where it's explained in that way. And I'm just kind of sharing this with you. And, you know, yeah. In ancient India, if you debated with somebody and you lost, you would convert and become a follower of their teacher. Westerners are so super sensitive, you know, we don't want to be wrong about anything. Yeah. But the Indians were ready. If something could be refuted, then they accepted, okay, I'm wrong, and another teacher knows better.
I've been holding a question that relates to this, that where I would like your advice, actually. The last time I was at the prison, I was in a section of the book where we were talking about who we take refuge in, and the use of the word Sangha. And I was explaining that, you know, we take refuge in the Sangha. These are people who have realizations and such. But what I noticed is that, and I might have misread this, and I'll have to check this out, it seemed like the group got kind of deflated around this. And I was thinking later that, you know, in prison, there's a huge identification with the group that you're in. And they don't have much else to take refuge in. And if you're, you know, some people there have been in the Dharma a long time and some haven't, but it's still, even just something about the energy really made me wonder about that. And I wondered if you had any thoughts.
Yeah, I think you can, it's still fair to explain exactly what the Sangha jewel is and the Sangha you take refuge in. And then you explain, in addition, how important it is to have Buddhist friends and how they understand parts of you that other people don't, and how you can support each other and counsel each other. And then you talk really about the benefit of Buddhist community and the Buddhist group itself. Yeah. And once you do that, then they'll be okay. Yeah. It's, you know, they don't have to call themselves Sangha. You could say, you know, being a member of the Buddhist community is really important, and this is why. And this reason, this reason, this reason, this was. And this is how you give to other people, and this is how you share, and this is how we all together continue to you know, keep the teachings alive and spread them and everything like that. So that then they're happy hearing that.
Would you say that Tantra is a technique, one among many used by Mahayanists to achieve enlightenment? And not like a philosophical system or a faith tradition?
It has its own explanation. It's not simply a meditation technique. Yeah. There's a whole explanation about how you view the body, how you view the mind, what the path is, what the grounds are, what are the stages that you practice. Yeah, it's not just one meditation technique. It's quite an elaborate body of knowledge and practice. In general, the uniqueness of Vajrayana comes from its sophistication in concentration and meditation practices that make it possible to attain full awakening quickly compared to the 3 countless great eons required to accumulate merit and wisdom by following the Sutrayana. So the path taught in the sutras. Ideally, Tantrayana is practiced on the basis of both the Shravaka-yana, the hero vehicle, and the general bodhisattva vehicle. When well trained in the 3 higher trainings of ethical conduct, concentration, and wisdom, and the 6 perfections of generosity, ethical conduct, fortitude, joyous effort, meditative stability, and wisdom, okay, when well trained in these, bodhisattvas with exceptionally strong bodhicitta enter the Tantrayana. Okay. with great compassion that finds sentient beings suffering in samsara unbearable, these bodhisattvas request and receive tantric initiation or empowerment, taking on the tantric ethical restraints and commitments. They then diligently engage in study and meditation on the tantric teachings in addition to the practices described in the sutras. So right there you see it's not something separate from the sutras. It's something in addition to the sutras. And you definitely need a good grounding in the sutra tradition. Okay? And they say, the motivation for entering Tantra is that your bodhicitta is so strong that the idea of sentient beings, misery and samsara for even 1 second longer is so unbearable that you feel a real urgency to attain full awakening. And since tantrayana has special techniques that enable you to develop serenity and insight and all these kinds of things, accumulate the two collections of merit and wisdom that are the principal causes for a Buddha's body and mind, because tantrayana has these attributes, and because your bodhicitta is so strong, then you want to enter the tantric vehicle, and you enter it by receiving an empowerment, which is like a meditation guided by a teacher where you visualize certain things, and it in that ceremony you also take certain ethical, you adopt the tantric ethical code and certain practice commitments. Okay. So Vajrayana is widespread amongst followers of Tibetan Buddhism and the Japanese Shingon sect. Tantric practices are threads in the Buddhist fabric of China, Korea, and Vietnam as well. Interestingly, the Amitabha practice popular in these countries is found in Tibetan Buddhism as a tantric practice. Okay. Unfortunately, misconceptions about Vajrayana exist due to lack of correct information. Yeah. So what are these? The standard misconceptions, okay, are, like I mentioned, that Tibetans practice magic, okay, that the monks are all having sex, and that it's completely okay to be a monk and drink. Okay, so these are rampant misconceptions about Vajrayana, okay, and they stem because in ancient India you have this yogi tradition, and very, very high realized people. Yeah, well, maybe I should read it here. It will explain it better, okay? So while sexual yoga and intoxicants are permitted in some tantric practices, they are firmly restricted only to people on very high stages of the path. Only a very few people are qualified to do these practices, and they do them discreetly. They don't advertise them. Fancying themselves highly realized tantric practitioners, people who have entered Vajrayana and yet engage in this behavior without having realized ultimate reality, are transgressing the tantric precepts and creating destructive karma. Furthermore, some so-called tantric practitioners have reduced tantrayana to the performance of rituals done with a worldly motivation, seeking wealth or prestige. Some people may give initiations to receive offerings. All of this is wrong and outside the scope of the Buddha Dharma. In this chapter, I explain how sincere and serious practitioners practice Vajrayana. Okay? So he's trying to make very clear that what these rumors are, yeah, are very, very misunderstood. Okay? So, as he says here, very few, maybe a handful of people alive today, yeah, can do these practices. It's at the very end of the Vajrayana path. And the sexual practices are not ordinary sex. So anybody who's just going around sleeping with everybody in the name of giving them a great blessing, you know, or initiating them into tantric practice, no, that's not how you do it, okay? So the people who really do this practice are very discreet. They don't advertise. They're not sleeping around with everybody. Okay? And the purpose of doing it is to manipulate the inner energies to make manifest the fundamental innate mind of clear light and use that extremely subtle mind that is only manifest otherwise at the time of death to realize emptiness. That's what the purpose is. Okay. So you see, you have to understand what emptiness is. You have to understand all about these winds. You have to understand what in the world the fundamental innate mind of clear light means. Yeah. Yeah. Then the people who drink, yeah, this is, again, only a very few people are who can do it. And they do it again because it's a way of working with the inner channels and the subtle nervous system in the body. Yeah. In the tantric precepts, you know, there's a lot of precepts regulating this kind of behavior. So people cannot just go sleeping around and drinking here and there and whatever. Part of the difficulty nowadays is that in ancient times, Tantra was practiced very, very privately. Yeah. Because otherwise people would misunderstand it like they are today. And also tantric initiation wasn't given very frequently in ancient times. It was only really when somebody was properly prepared. In Tibet, you know, they kind of loosened all the requirements, so more people started taking tantric initiation. And then coming to the West, it's just been, you know, like some people, their very first exposure to the Dharma is they're walking into a Dharma center and there's an initiation and everybody says, oh, this is a great opportunity because this is a very high Lama, you should take this initiation. And the person's brand new. They don't know anything about karma. They don't even know precious human life. They haven't taken refuge. So this is completely not as it should be. Yeah. And some of the problem is, it's a two-way problem. Some of the problem comes from the students themselves because they want the highest thing and the quickest thing and the most exciting thing. So they want this kind of stuff. Part of the problem comes from the lamas because more people come when they give these kind of ceremonies than when they give teachings. Yeah, because if you're teaching about the Four Noble Truths and you start out with the 6 disadvantages of samsara and the 8 sufferings of the human realm and the 3 kinds of suffering, you know, people don't want to hear that. They want to hear light and love and bliss. And you go to a tantric initiation, and for many people, the less you understand, the bigger blessing they think they're getting. Because they view it like magic. I'm sitting in the presence of a high lama. I am open and receptive. And he could say anything he wants in Tibetan and you don't understand it. He could be saying, hop along Cassidy and Mickey Mouse in Tibetan, and you think you're getting a blessing because you don't understand. This is idiocy. We have to understand what we're learning and what we're hearing. Yeah. So people have this idea that, they sit near some holy person and then, again, this thing, I don't need to do any work. I can just sit and soak up the vibes and they're going to give me enlightenment. Now, I don't have to exert any energy in meditating. I don't have to think about the suffering nature of samsara. I don't need to overcome my anger. I can just sit there and soak up the vibes and give a donation at the end. And then we're all happy because the Lama has money to take back for his monastery, and I have my blessing.
And your blessing cord.
And my blessing cord, yes, my blessing cord. My blessing cord, my kusu grass. Maybe I have some long life pills too. Woo! Okay? So this is not as it should be. Not at all. Okay? So His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, some years ago, he was teaching in Mountain View, California, and he was teaching on the Prajnaparamita Sutras, and then he was giving a medicine Buddha empowerment at the end, or Jainong, the permission. The teachings on the Prajnaparamita were just unbelievable. I mean, I was just blown away. And there was a good crowd there. Yeah, and those teachings were maybe 4 or 5 days long. Then the last day he was giving the medicine Buddha blessing. Not only was the regular area filled, but the whole back, people were sitting outdoors on the grassy knoll, all the way back, tons of people. And His Holiness says, what's the story here? How comes so many people don't come for the teaching, but just come for the tantric blessing? It should be the opposite, that more people come for the teaching and and fewer people come for the tantric blessing. And he went on about this. He was not pleased. Okay. And when he talks about the Kala Chakra Tantra, which is the one that he does give publicly, but he gives people an option to actually take it and to be an observer, which is not possible for any other tantric ceremony. But he says, because it's usually, about 5 days of introductory teachings and then 4 or 5 days of the initiation, something like that. He says, the real purpose why I give the Kala Chakra is so people will come to the 5 days of the introductory teachings, because that's what's really going to benefit them. But I get them there by saying it's a Kala Chakra initiation. And then he says, but some people outsmart me, and they don't come for the first 5 days, they only come for the last part. Yeah? But so that this is quite unfortunate, that's not the way it should be. Yeah. So, I see this, not only in Southeast Asia, but also here, this kind of blind faith attitude, grasping at the highest thing. And, when I go to teach in Malaysia, actually, when I teach in KL, some years ago, the people who arranged the teachings, they told me I was the only person from the Tibetan tradition who came there in those days who actually taught. Everybody else did ceremonies. Yeah. I mean, now Rinpoche is going there, so I'm sure they're getting all sorts of teachings day and night unceasingly. And he gives initiations too, But Yeah. Okay. So maybe we should stop here. So look at 2, 4, 6. Yeah, we can finish tomorrow. We'll go quickly. Yeah, this is a good place to stop for the people online. Okay. So my purpose in saying all this is not to scare people away from Tantrayana. It's very profound, but to put it in the proper perspective so that we really appreciate it and use it correctly.